Hello, my name is Bruce. I am a visiting professor here at Incheon National University in South Korea. I'm also a doctoral student at Florida State University. My study is how is English conversation useful? Korean University students' perspectives. Here's a brief overview of my presentation for today. I'll give you a brief literature overview. So first we'll talk about internationalization. And since the 90s, Korean universities have been internationalizing. So in order to raise their standings abroad, they started offering major coursework in English, and this requires some English courses with native English teachers. Wade-all found that many courses that were supposedly taught in English were only nominally taught in English and include many more Korean components than the official course guide would suggest. THTA found that the teaching English through English policies had negative impacts on existing structures' perception of the quality of their teaching, though less so for newer teachers. And J. Choi et al. Found that aspects of global culture emerge in English language programs in Korea. They're not distinctly Korean, but not entirely foreign either. Next, I'll give a brief overview of the literature about Korean EFL students' attitudes about spoken English. Kim found that Korean students raised abroad, even when studying in English-based universities in Korea, avoid speaking English to each other outside of the classroom to maintain their identities as Koreans. And multiple other studies have confirmed Korean students' anxieties when speaking English, especially in the foreign language classroom. Lee and Chiet found that Korean university students consider English a global language that could be useful for their future career. Kim et al. Found that students in English task-based courses, though they originally found the courses difficult, over time their perceptions changed. They later perceived the courses as more motivational for using English in class. And another study by H. Kim found that Korean students found pragmatic English instruction more useful than academic English. Han in 2005, when surveying Korean students about native English instructors, found that Korean students were put off by native English teachers who tried to force too much Western culture too quickly in the classroom, whereas Jang in 2017 found that Korean students appreciated a hybrid Western Korean cultural approach to classroom instruction. Based on the literature review, these are the research questions that I came up with. So, for what uses do Korean university students find mandatory English conversation courses the most useful? In what ways and to what extent do Korean university students use English in their majors? And what's the relationship between the amount of English Korean university students use in their major and how they perceive the usefulness of mandatory English conversation courses? For the method, I took a qualitative approach. I surveyed 89 students enrolled in the second semester of an advanced level English conversation course at a public university in South Korea. The survey is 17 questions long and includes a 5-level Likert scale, and I administered it using Qualtrics. Students used their smartphones to scan a QR code, and it took them to a survey. They completed the survey before their class began. The survey had 3 distinct sections: demographic information, English usage in major coursework, and usefulness of mandatory English conversation classes taught by native English teachers. I controlled for gender, time spent living or studying abroad, and age. None of these 3 factors significantly impacted the findings. 19.1% of the advanced students reported living abroad for at least 1 month, but 3/4 of those who reported living abroad had lived abroad for less than 6 months total. Now for the findings on the course usefulness. And this is the students' perception of the usefulness of mandatory English conversation courses with native English teachers. This is based on a Likert scale, so 5 being very useful, 1 not useful at all. And students found the course most useful for making foreign friends and traveling abroad. But I think it is worth noting that this survey took place before the COVID-19 pandemic. So though this may be different if I were to survey the same students now. But they also found it useful for daily life, standardized test preparation, finding a job, and major coursework was the least useful, but I will discuss more details about that later in the presentation. So how did the Korean students use English in their major? And again, this is based on a Likert scale, meaning these activities are done entirely in English in their major coursework. That's a 5, and a 1 would mean no English at all. And as you'll see, the most popular is communicating with foreign professors. That had the highest average for using English. But it is worth noting that a full third of the students did not answer this question. But after that would be reading assigned textbooks, reading class handouts, class lectures, tests, student preparations, assignments, student group discussions, and communicating with Korean professors. So despite having classes that are nominally taught in English, very few of the students would actually communicate with a Korean professor using English. And this would match with the research that I found in the literature review. So how useful is English conversation class for students' majors? Well, the answer basically depends on how much English they use in their classroom. And all of these are significant correlations. So the biggest impact was on English presentations and how much English is used in class materials and tests, lectures, textbooks, and in peer discussions. So as students actually used them more, they found the class more useful. When students didn't use English in their majors, they found it less useful. The biggest limitation on this study is that only students from one university and one professor were studied. Additionally, only students in the advanced level course were studied, so it's entirely possible that lower level students may perceive the usefulness differently. Overall, advanced students mostly perceive their mandatory English conversation courses with native English teachers as useful. Advanced students perceive their English conversation class most useful for making foreign friends and traveling abroad, and the more students use English in their majors, the more useful students perceive English conversation class for their major studies. For future studies, this study could be expanded to include a larger sample of universities, levels of students, and instructors. Here are the sources that I reference for the study. Thanks for listening.